New tonight, a lawyer for E. Jean Carroll saying the writer may sue Trump again for comments he made during last night's CNN town hall, mocking her claim that he raped her in a Manhattan department store in the mid-1990s.
I never met this woman. I never saw this woman. This woman said, I met her at the front door of Bergdorf Goodman, which I rarely go into other than for a couple of charities. This is a fake story, made up story.
An attorney for Carroll telling the New York Times everything's on the table, obviously, and we have to give serious consideration to suing Trump again. It comes as Trump officially filed his appeal in the $5 million jury decision that found that he sexually abused and defamed Carroll. Out front now, Ryan Goodman, co-editor-in-chief of Just Security, also former special counsel at the Defense Department. So, Ryan, let's start there. These comments we just played from Trump, they match almost identically with his social media post in October 2022, right? Almost identically, but that is very significant because that post is the post that the jury found to be defamatory in this case. Quote, I don't know this woman, have no idea who she is. She completely made up a story. So do you think she could win another defamation case?
Absolutely. Because it is a kind of a replica of what he said before. A jury has already found unanimously that that was defamatory. And in fact, she could actually walk into the court and say, part of this has already been decided between these two parties. There's already a unanimous verdict that I was telling the truth about the sexual assault, and what he did was maliciously defaming me. And here he has done it again.
Right, so she could absolutely do it. Now, I guess the big question is, will she? I mean, she already has a victory. She's got $5 million.
Yeah, it's a very personal choice as to whether or not she wants to do it and put herself through another trial, but she might be able to convince the judge that, as I mentioned, in a certain sense, some of these issues have already been decided, so she does not have to go through the rigor again of going through what happened to her. That will already be established, and then she can just go to the question of defamation, not to the question of whether or not there was a sexual assault.
Okay, so take that part away, all right, which could be very significant. Now, you're pointing to a few other comments last night that could impact the two DOJ criminal cases in which we are still awaiting potential indictment from the DOJ. So let's start with January 6th. Caitlin asked Trump about the danger that was posed to his then vice president, Mike Pence. Let me play that exchange.
One person who was at the Capitol that day, as you know, was your vice president, Mike Pence, who says that you endangered his life on that day.
I don't think he was in any danger.
Mr. President, do you feel that you owe him an apology?
No, because he did something wrong. He should have put the votes back to the state legislatures, and I think we would have had a different outcome.
You find that incriminating. Explain.
It's very similar to the testimony that was given to the January 6th committee where he says Pence deserved it, in the sense that he was put in danger, and then the answer is no, but he is responsible for having put himself in danger by not decertifying or trying to interfere with the certification of the election. He's saying it similarly, and also his lawyer says that to Pence's lawyer in the midst of the attack. Eastman says to Greg Jacob, no, you all are responsible for this because if your boss, Pence, had acted differently, there wouldn't be this violence. That's very incriminating, and it also goes with him suggesting that he would pardon some of these people, even up to the Proud Boys. It's an endorsement of the violence in a certain sense, and I think that would be really important evidence that, in fact, the DOJ would use before a jury if they did bring it to that.
All right, so that is significant. There's also the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case that you think is front and center here. Let me play the exchange over the classified documents.
Did you ever show those classified documents to anyone?
Not really. I would have the right to. By the way, they were declassified
What do you mean, not really?
after. Not that I can think of. Let me just tell you, I have the absolute right to do whatever I want with them.
Not really, and not that I can think of.
So that's hedging on this very important question.
Right.
Did you share it with anybody else? If he shared those documents with anybody else, it puts the case in a very different category under the Espionage Act, and it ratchets up the likelihood that he'll be indicted, because that's a very different kind of a case if you share it with other people. The fact that he's hedging like that, I'm sure everybody inside of Jack Smith's, the special counsel's office, their ears pricked up, because he's not denying that he did that. It sounds like there's something really there. Plus, he's also saying that he was aware that the documents were removed from the White House. That's another piece that he said last night, that is really important to the case.
All right. Well, of course, as we await those possible indictments, whether there would be one in January 6th as well as Mar-a-Lago, whether they come together or not, we await. All right, Ryan, thank you very much. And I want to go now to Republican Congressman from New York, Mike Lawler. He has said the GOP needs to move on from Trump. And Congressman, I appreciate your time. So, you heard Ryan there explaining why Trump may have put himself in even more legal jeopardy with those comments that we were just playing about the classified documents case, about Pence and January 6th. But of course, the other part of this is that the people in the room were applauding Trump as he said this. What's your feeling about that? Does it make you want to move on from Trump even more?
Well, I can't speak to the CNN town hall or how the audience was selected or the topics discussed. I mean, that's something obviously you guys can speak to better than I. But, look, I've said repeatedly that, I think the party needs to move in a new direction, that I think whoever the nominee is needs to be focused on the future and the challenges facing the American people. Right now in Congress, we're focused on the debt ceiling and the migrant crisis impacting our nation. And, when I met with the president yesterday in my district, that is what I talked about. That was my focus on the issues that we're dealing with. And so, I'm not interested in relitigating 2020. I've said repeatedly, Joe Biden won the election.
Yes,
it's time
indeed.
to move on from that.
So, and I'm going to ask you both about debt and immigration, but first, I do want to ask you one other thing, because what matters here at this moment in time, whatever the predicate is what other Republicans are going to do. You're talking about yourself, but there are Republicans who have been strong supporters of Trump in the past who are breaking with him over some of his remarks last night. And I wanted to play two of them. They may surprise you. Senator Hawley is one of them. Senator Tillis is another one. They're weighing in on the fact that Trump promised, yet again, pardons for January 6th rioters. Here they are.
Anybody who crossed in to the into the Capitol under the circumstances that I witnessed firsthand, it's hard for me to have a positive predisposition towards them. But just generally, I disagree.
But if you're asking me, do I think you should pardon people who engaged in rioting behavior? No, I don't.
Of course, Senator Hawley, as you're well aware, Congressman, voted to overturn the election. He had that famous, fist bump to the pro-Trump crowd on January 6th before it stormed the Capitol. But neither of those senators actually went so far as to say they would not support Trump as the nominee. They're not saying, let's move it. They're not saying what you're saying, right, loudly and clearly. So what do you read into this? Do you think this is the beginning of real cracks in Trump's core support or not?
Well, look, I can't speak to others and what they think or how they're going to act during this primary process. What I can say is this: with respect to January 6th, I was the first state legislator in New York to condemn it. I don't care, frankly, who it is. Anybody who stormed the Capitol should be held responsible for their own conduct.
Yep.
Just like anybody who stormed a federal courthouse in Oregon, or anybody who burned a police precinct to the ground. When you commit acts of violence, you should be held liable, period. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the bottom line on this.